Hi, welcome to Behind the Screens. This is a new video series by Airtame where we dissect some of the most common questions in screen technology where Airtame plays. I am Simone, Content and Comms Lead at Airtame, naturally. And I think today's guest probably needs no introduction. It is Jonas. Hi, Jonas.
Oh, well, I think that's too much. Hello, happy to be here.
Please introduce yourself with title and how long you've been employed at Airtame.
Yes, I'm Jonas. I've been here since the beginning. I'm one of the co-founders, so that is 12 and a half years or so.
What a treat to have you on.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, so the question today is about classroom screen technology and total cost of ownership. The full question is, what does classroom screen technology cost over time?
hmm Yes. You just want me to answer that right away? Give it
We're
to
going
me.
to dissect it a little bit
Okay,
over
fair
time.
enough,
So
fair
maybe
enough.
first, what is total cost of ownership in classroom screen technology? What's that
Yes.
like? Sometimes we call it TCO, total cost of ownership.
Yes.
What does that entail?
Yeah, so I think if we take at least the bigger themes, and then we can dive into each of them or some of them maybe to have a few examples. But when schools are looking at investing in screen technology, such as Airtame, they should of course go through some different phases. There's everything from the research phase, evaluate based on their challenges and jobs to be done, what exists on the market, right? Then there's a piloting phase where you actually test out some of the different solutions and you can compare, right? Then there's the purchasing decision and the upfront cost, which is the more known, you could say, cost. I would argue, because you know what the price of the hardware and or software is, right? So you can factor that in to, of course, your total cost of ownership. But you have maybe other like sort of hidden costs, like infrastructure upgrades. It could be like Wi-Fi capacity upgrades, optimizations. There's obviously the installation cost, the physical installation of the devices, the screens, the cables, what have you. You have, I think, an overlooked cost driver, which is the training of the IT staff, IT management, depending on what solution you're going for, how complicated it is to use, essentially, but also the education of the IT management team, so they can also maybe onboard the teachers,
So end user
in a
training
school,
as well.
exactly, end user training. So especially, of course, the teachers could be substitute teachers, could maybe even be students, right? You of course need to teach them how to use the new solution you're going with, and of course that is also you know both the IT staff and the end users need to spend the time on being trained in whatever new solution, which is time spent away from maybe their day-to-day job, their teaching or the preparation for the class. So there's also a little bit of an opportunity cost, actually, if there's a lot of training involved with the new solution. Then, of course, there's the ongoing cost, which could be like the maintenance cost from especially the IT team, the subscription cost, ongoing subscription cost, the leasing cost if you lease the hardware. So all of the ongoing costs. And then towards the end of the life expectancy of the hardware, let's say you have maybe uninstallation costs.
Uninstallation cost.
Yes, if you need to, let's say you lease hardware, at one point in time, you need to, if you don't continue to lease the product, you would actually need to physically uninstall that in all of the different rooms, right? And then send it back to
Ship.
wherever that should go. So that can be a big cost driver for the whole total cost of ownership, evaluation, right? So I think those would be at least. I don't know if that was briefly mentioned. I think I'm past that. Yeah, but some of the, I think, the categories that are important for you to consider as a school when you look at evaluating screen technology.
So maybe this is a twofold question. Maybe so, who's the decision maker, and are they aware of all of these different phases pertaining to total cost of ownership? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them are, to give them credit. I think there are some things that sometimes maybe should be evaluated maybe a little deeper. But the typical decision makers are. I'll start with the stakeholders involved in deciding on new technology. You have the IT team driving probably the project. They will have to actually do the research and typically the installation and the testing and of course the management. So they're hugely important stakeholders, a stakeholder. And then you have some teachers could be instructional technology, tech-savvy teachers that sometimes are part of evaluating new
As like
technology.
champions for new
Champions for
technology?
exactly
Or?
for new technology. So they're closely involved. The network team, sometimes that they sit within the IT department. Sometimes it's a separate team. Also very important to very important stakeholder as part of the evaluation. Typically, the budget sits with IT, but I would mention all those three stakeholder groups as super important.
So who usually will come up with the decision to implement a new type of screen technology, such as Airtame or another product? Would that typically come from IT, where they know that they have a problem to solve or a new technology that they want to implement, or would it come from a frustrated teacher, say, who will then bring those frustrations, or maybe the IT overhead becomes so big because of the teacher's frustrations that it's hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
What do we usually see happening? That it comes from the teacher, the end user, or the IT department?
Well, it could be all of the above.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's equally both of them. And I would add that in addition to those two main things, there could also be a need for standardizing the technology across your entire district.
Uh-huh.
So that could be another factor that would play in that the school board wants to roll out and unify the technology across all of the tens, hundreds of schools they have in their district, because it's easier to
Maintain.
manage and maintain.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, depending on the
Um,
technology.
Depending on the technology, you need to, of course, factor that in, right?
Because if you have to walk room to room to maintain or update firmware, maybe it's not as easy to do that, even if you have standardized technology.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What about budgeting in schools? Does that look different than, for example, in the business world? Do they have
Uh,
different cycles?
Yeah, I mean, let's take the US as an example, where the budget year starts in beginning of July or mid-July, and then it rolls until end of June, which makes sense because the summertime is also the best time to install new hardware, especially.
Because no one's at the
Because
school.
no one, exactly, everybody's off, right? So you have empty classrooms and hallways, so you have good time to actually then,
Rollout.
roll out and install all the new things, right? So that's, I mean, so basically the year goes, starting school is in September, right? That's when the new technology should be ready for the kids and for the teachers to use. And then towards the end of the fiscal year, or calendar year, you typically look at your piloting projects. So over the winter time, maybe the Christmas break, you could also then that's an opportunity to install some hardware in some schools or some classrooms to evaluate and to test what do we want to go for like the summer period.
Hmm.
Pilot projects are happening mostly during winter time, and then springtime it's more decision making and budgeting exercises. What should we spend on the current year's budget before end of June, and what should we buy with a new budget
Okay.
coming in July?
What about when a subscription runs out, but you have hardware, and just let's say that you have hardware that's not a rental, that you
Mhm.
don't have to return it, you still have the hardware, but the subscription runs out.
Mhm.
What happens?
Well, it depends on the solution, and depends on the philosophy, basically, of the company, right? Some solutions would basically brick the device,
Brick the device,
which
meaning?
means it becomes useless. If you don't pay an ongoing
Oh, so
subscription,
it's like a
you
brick?
lose
It's a
all.
useless brick.
Yeah, it's a brick. Exactly.
Oh, I
It's
get it.
it's
I
it's
didn't get it
nothing
until
but
now.
the box, the actual box.
Yeah.
So you basically don't keep any software features. You basically keep
An empty
nothing
shell.
if you don't renew the subscription. Others, they let you keep some basic functionality. That's like Airtame. That's our philosophy. We believe that the subscription should give you a lot of the value, and hopefully you see that there's actual value in that package, and it's a way to finance us being able to continue to deliver value over time.
Right.
So that's why we have this model, because we want to continuously create the best thing possible. And it's a way to finance that and align expectations. If you don't get enough value out of it, you can decide to not renew, but hopefully you see that there's actually
In
a
the
lot of
added
useful
capabilities.
But we
Basic
don't
functionalities will
exactly.
remain.
We don't believe in breaking the device. We don't believe in you don't keep anything. We think that's too big of a risk for the schools out there that they invest in hardware that essentially becomes useless if they don't pay a subscription. So with Airtame, for example, you do keep some basic screen sharing functionality and a few other things. And then, of course, you have some companies where it's all a leasing-based model, which means if you stop paying the ongoing cost, you have to you don't even they don't even break the device. You have to return it, right? So you have to pay for the uninstall in every classroom, which could be hundreds of classrooms, right? Where you need to uninstall it and send it back, right? So that's absolutely a sort of a hidden cost
Yeah.
driver in the TCO.
Yeah. So I also hear from you there's like two major cost drivers. It's costly for IT to educate and re-educate and maintain and set up, and it's difficult for teachers to learn and understand and dependably use a device. And so those two factors drive up cost massively.
Mhm.
So what should a school or a district be looking for when they evaluate this stuff before buying?
Well, of course, depends on their individual needs and what they want to solve for. Um, but they should. My recommendation is that they at least take a good look at what is the cost of educating and onboarding IT staff, teachers, first and foremost, could be students as well, because it can be a bit of a hidden cost. And typically, there's um, maybe it's not even a paradox, but there's a balance between how much functionality and how many features are supported, with the
That was going to
product.
be
I
my
think
next
is
question. Yeah.
great. It's almost like we have prepared for this conversation.
Sounds like
Um,
we know each other.
right, exactly. So um, there's a balance in what features do you bring with the product, and you could solve for many different use cases and sort of edge cases, and it would be great to add this feature or that
Which
feature.
you would then have to train for.
Exactly, and that's the cost. So
Yeah.
there is a cost of adding new stuff, and the cost is typically that you need to spend more time and money on training IT staff and training teachers, right? And at least people should be, maybe, in my opinion, be a little bit more aware of, okay, if we want this feature, can you do this? Can you do that? But if we added all these things, we don't protect the ease of use and the ease of management that we care a whole lot about, because it will create a much more plug and play solution and drive total cost of ownership down. And at the end of the day, in the classroom, what a teacher wants is to get started with their class. They have something to present typically to a bigger screen or projector in the room. They want to get going. They want to click and they want to go. That's my belief. They don't want to know about the technology almost. They don't want to care about, oh,
They
you could
don't
also
care
do
it's
this
Airtame.
and you
They
can
don't
do
care
that and you can do
details.
this. It's like, hey, they're busy enough
Yeah.
as it is, right? Like I can't even imagine being in they of course want to focus on the class and not the technology. So our philosophy is that in order to protect that core flow, we don't add all the different things that we actually could add, because it would be more expensive to train them on how to use all those things, and it would be more than difficult for them to actually do the basic stuff in the classroom. So we care about doing that super well, and that will actually drive the whole total cost of ownership down.
So, because then I had a question that's what does a generally good value setup look like in education today? And it's actually taking stuff away, maybe making it easy,
Suck
because
it away.
if you have to keep re-education, because re-educating staff or IT departments, that's also going to drive up cost, but also lost opportunity to keep teaching or doing other stuff.
Right, right. Yeah.
So a good value setup is maybe one that does maybe not necessarily works out of the box, but almost it is what it is, and you
Mhm.
don't have to worry too much about the rest of it.
I would say so. And of course, it's not to say that all new features are bad or new feature requests. Like we love that. We love to hear from customers. We have a public roadmap where people can also follow what is coming out next. So it's not to say that we won't add new features, but we just have a strong principle, which is to think through what does the adding new stuff actually cost from a user experience perspective and from a onboarding perspective, and at least be conscious about what that brings, what what it potentially clutters as part of the experience. Um, and sometimes that can be forgotten a little bit or downplayed, in my opinion, um, because it makes sense to think through, or what if I had to do this, right? Could you support that? Or what if I had to do this? Could you support that? But it takes a lot of time. You need to add a lot of buttons or different workflows in order to accommodate for all these things, and you need to teach people how they're going to do it,
Yeah.
in the classroom. And so that's the balance. It's almost like uh, the wardrobe principle. If you put something in, you should consider taking something out, so you don't clutter it up, right? To maintain the overview, make sure it's like it
Buy a bigger closet.
exactly, or buy a big closet, but also in that analogy.
So, and this is a little bit of a cheeky question that I put in because I want to put you on the spot a little bit, Jonas.
Thanks.
What can companies like ours do to be more transparent regarding total
Companies playing in the classroom screen space,
screen
or
technology? Yeah, exactly. And now we're speaking specifically about education sector
yeah,
today.
um,
Pricing
what,
upfront.
what they could, yeah, I mean, transparency into mm, how they address maybe each phase,
Right.
and how they support what they're thinking on, for example, adding new stuff, right?
Mhm.
Adding new stuff in and by itself sounds great, but there's a cost
Right.
associated to that. And I think the industry kind of deserves a more honest conversation about what are the implications of
Yeah.
doing that, and what's the right balance. And I'm not saying that Airtame has the perfect balance right now. I'm not saying that we have the best balance for everyone. There's also, of course, different preferences out there.
Of course.
I mean, some people, they like to, you can do all these things, and then we'll manage to teach and figure out how do we actually onboard everyone so they know all the capabilities
Or just the ones that they need. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Or hey, we need to protect the core flows, and that's what we care about, and that's what should be easy, and it should be dependable, and it should be easy for the IT team to manage this, right? That which is another hugely important part of the equation. How much time ongoingly does the IC staff actually have to use in order to support this new technology? Will they get a lot of IT support tickets, to make it super concrete, right? Because something is not working. It's maybe you can do a lot of stuff, but it's unstable, right?
Yeah.
Or you can do a lot of stuff, but people can't find it out. And even though you trained them on it, they're not sure how to do it, which means they will escalate. They will call IT, or have a ticket there or whatever. And all of those costs should be factored in and understood. I think
Yeah.
a bit more.
Yeah, and also what happens to the device after the subscription runs out. All of those things I think should be listed on the website. Also, I know I work in marketing, and so there's maybe sort of that perception that marketing is also a little bit about that like delusional layer, like we're adding something to it so that people don't understand. I want to take stuff away. I would love for it to be as honest as possible.
Right.
This is the price. This is what happens.
Yep.
This is what you get. This is what you don't get, because people don't necessarily get that or understand that unless it's right there. And we want them to understand at a glance so that they don't get disappointed, because a disappointed customer is not a great customer to have.
Right.
Yeah.
And I very much agree. And of course, we are all interested in promoting our own companies and the companies that we work for. So I totally get that, and I know that it's a competitive space, which is great because it keeps all of us on our toes.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change that. Our philosophy from basically for 12 years has been, we love to do as truthful as possible comparisons between Airtame and the competition. Doesn't mean we get it perfect. It doesn't mean that we're not biased and we like Airtame, but we really try to actually make a thorough overview of what do you get with Airtame compared to competitors, and try to also be honest about what are they doing well. Like why should you go with them? Because there's some cases where it makes sense to go with them, and I like that transparency. If I put myself in the mind and the shoes of somebody that have to evaluate these things, right? The more you hide your cards and try to just make it all, look perfect, and you don't actually go into the details, the more annoyed I would be, because I would then find out about the details afterwards, or would have to do more work to find the details. And I think, for example, with the rise of LLMs and stuff, you can actually get into the details easier, and sometimes maybe more truthfully
Yeah.
than visiting a website.
Provided that you've listed it transparently on your website.
Exactly. So of
That-
course it has some
Yeah.
information to go with.
All right. So the question was, what does classroom screen technology cost over time? And your brief answer is probably it depends. But
It depends, but the themes, the categories you should look at would be the research phase, the piloting phase, the upfront cost, the hardware and or software purchase upfront, the installation cost, physical installation cost, the infrastructure optimizations, upgrades, for example, Wi-Fi capacity upgrades and such, and then the ongoing costs, subscription cost, leasing cost, IT management cost, and oh, by the way, the big one that I almost forgot is the training, right?
onboarding.
And which is kind of from, of course, upfront purchase, but also throughout, right? So, but especially in the beginning. So the training of the IT staff and the teachers first and foremost, all of the ongoing costs, and then towards the end of the hardware lifetime period, or end of contract, or end of lease, or what have you, there's uninstallation cost, or there is a cost associated with not continuing to use the product, whether it's the subscription or the actual hardware.
Or losing capabilities. and having
Losing
to-
capabilities, yeah. So that's almost like from a little bit of a customer journey view on it. What are the different phases that you have to look at? What are the costs associated with all these phases?
Yeah, and the answer probably is then that it's a lot of these costs are hidden.
Yeah,
And it's
some of
hard
them, at
to,
least.
to
Yeah,
find out. And so you have to kind of see it from all the different angles.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Jonas.
Likewise.